And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge. I'm Anthony Irwin, joined on this fine, quiet Wednesday afternoon by George Sedano, friend of the show, friend of myself. I am lucky enough, I think, to be able to consider him a friend. Somebody who, if you watch ESPN games, he's there on the sideline. If you watch ESPN shows, he's there talking about those games. If you listen to ESPN radio, he is on ESPN radio 4 to 7 on the Sedano and Cap show every day, which is then live 4 to 7 on the radio and then also available via pod. The man is a very busy man, so I'm not going to hold up too much more of his time. George, thank you very much for hopping on.
Happy to be here, bud. Let's talk Lakers trade deadline.
It's the deadline? I had no idea. Like, you
Yeah,
wouldn't
who would have
know
known that it would have been coming up so soon,
Yeah. All right. So today on the show, we're going to be talking about the fact that everything is still quiet, especially on the Lakers front. We're going to be talking about LeBron's subtweeting,
Jesus.
and how it's likely to continue if the Lakers continue to be quiet here at the deadline. And then right before we went live, we had a nice little morsel from Bill Ryder of CBS Sports that normally I would kind of chuckle at, and I probably still will a little bit, but I do think because it links to some of the reporting I did way back like a month ago, that it's worth discussing a little bit. But yeah, let's start with like what got us here with LeBron, where he drops that hourglass emoji. He flirts with the Knicks for basically an entire weekend. Earlier this year, he was saying that the Clippers are Ty Lue's team, not any of the various superstars that are there, and how Ty Lue has kept that thing together. There are plenty of screen grabs of LeBron side-eyeing Darvin Ham. Clearly, the season hasn't gone in the way that LeBron would like it to go. It seems like this trade deadline is likely to not go in the way that LeBron would like it to go. So what do you think the next step in the escalation process would be? Do you think we get another step?
I mean, the other step for him, other than passive aggressive social media posts, would be to actually opt out and see what the marketplace would be. I think that's the only thing that he would have left to play into at this particular point. So I guess that's it. Like, that would be my guess. But here's the thing in regards to all this, okay? At least the coaching part of the equation. And I like Darvin Ham. I think Darvin Ham is a good young coach, but I emphasize the word young in the sense that he's inexperienced. So there's going to be a growth curve here. And I know Laker fans don't want to hear this. And I see all your tweets when I tweet anything about the team. Like, I get it. Okay.
I thought you were saying my tweets. I was like,
yeah,
please.
No, well, yours too. Yours too. I see yours too. But I'm talking about the Laker fans who may be listening at the moment or watching at the moment. I get it. But this is part of and it's not his fault that he got the job, right? Like, the team hired him knowing that they had an aging superstar and another superstar on the team that have a small window of opportunity. So you let go of a coach who had gone deep into the playoffs prior to his arrival, who had been part of a championship team. And you hired a guy who hadn't done the job before, who was a great assistant, but he had not done this job before. So there was going to be bumps in the road. We saw that last year. And then they were able to kind of make it all work with the trade deadline. Although in retrospect, and maybe I'm forgetting this slightly, but I feel like the schedule down the stretch was slightly easier than it had been prior to the deadline. And they also got great matchups for them in those first two rounds of the playoffs. And I look at this team now and say, well, maybe that was a little bit of a mirage with this particular group because of the schedule and because of the matchups. And maybe this team, as currently constituted, is matchup dependent, right? That if they get the right matchup, that they could potentially advance out of the first round or maybe even the second round of the playoffs, which kind of is what LeBron has said. On certain nights, we can beat anybody. On other nights, we can get our ass kicked. But I think ultimately this stuff to me is an organizational failure in a lot of ways, because if you hire a first-time head coach, there needs to be some semblance of hand-holding. There needs to be some semblance of, hey, here's what our analytics staff is saying about lineups or whatnot, or here's how we can help you. And it feels like everyone there is on an island and they have to fend for themselves. It's like the adage of throwing the kid in the pool and saying, go swim, even though he's never learned or she's never learned how to swim, and you're throwing him in the deep end. And again, you could have solved some of this years ago, even before Vogel, if you just would have been less frugal about hiring Ty Lue, who LeBron clearly praises now more than he even did when he was in Cleveland. Not that he praised them all that much in Cleveland, but at the end of the day, they clearly, I think of all the coaches he's played for, they had the best relationship. So there's just a lot of things that fall on the organization that I think are not being discussed enough. Not to say that the lion's share of the blame on the day-to-day shouldn't be on Darvin Ham, but I think that a lot of these issues could be avoided if the organization was more aggressive in aiding their coach and aiding themselves in these situations when they arise in real time.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you find negative trends in an organization, they can often be charted upward, right? The thing that I was kind of thinking about while you were talking about making Darvin Ham the head coach of a LeBron James team with championship aspirations, this isn't like, taking over a Kobe team when the expectation there was like they were going to win 20 or 30 games. This was a team coming into this season and last season. We're like, no, we're expecting you guys to vie for a championship. And George, like one of the things that has frankly been inspiring and watching from afar is your undertaking of trying to do play-by-play for football stuff, right? And doing that stuff. And I'm just thinking of like, imagine while you've been trying this, that like your first job is the Super Bowl.
Right.
Like it was just like essentially that's what they're doing here with Darvin, where it's like, all right, yeah, sure. Normally first time head coaches get to swim over there in the shallow end and you get to stand up occasionally and you get some, you get to bowl with some guiders and some bumpers on each side or whatever. But no, this time we're going to dump you in the deep end of not just like a nice YMCA pool or something like that, but no, like the kind that the killer whales swim around in SeaWorld,
Yeah.
Like it's just like, have fun, buddy.
Yeah. And by the way, I had a similar commentary just recently on my radio show, and the reaction on social media after I said it in real time was, well, Ty Lue and Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley were first-time coaches and they won championships. And the difference is those guys were assistants on those teams where they won championships for, okay? And by the way, so if Darvin Ham would have taken over for Mike Budenholzer, at least there is some equity amongst the group of players that he is coaching at that particular time. He came to a completely new situation. Yes, I know he coached as an assistant with the Lakers back in 2012, but none of those guys are here right now. So there's no equity with this particular group too, which is also another part of the equation.
Not to mention the amount of experience above those guys' heads, right? Spo had Riley. Riley had Jerry West.
Yeah.
Darvin Ham
David
has
Griffin, right? Who had been a successful GM already for a little bit,
Yeah. Darvin Ham, the experience above his head is Rob Pelinka, who is still in his fifth year in this position.
Who's also fairly new at the job, right? To your point.
Exactly. Yeah. So like when LeBron shows his frustration on all this stuff, like I know fans, Lakers fans in particular, especially Lakers fans who like really prefer Kobe to LeBron. I think that's always a bit of an undertone when Lakers fans criticize LeBron, is like, well, he's not Kobe. And sure, whatever. Kobe also was kind of pissed off at one point with the Lakers. And I think it's the Stars' job to hold the organization's feet to the fire when they aren't doing their jobs.
By the way, I mean, I know it's a long time ago now, but he was literally in a strip mall in Orange County when some kid was recording him on a flip camera phone back in those days, asking about trading Andrew Bynum for Jason Kidd. And he was like, of course you should trade Andrew Bynum for Jason Kidd. So like, yes, this has happened before in a much more aggressive and less passive way.
Yeah. Maybe I kind of want it to be more aggressive, like aggressive. Like I'd like to see active aggressive here from LeBron at some point. And maybe to where this all started was you saying that maybe that looks like him opting out in this upcoming season, or if not opting out, asking for a trade after he opts into the $51 million player option that, like, as
I
it's
don't
been
see that
communicated.
option, by the way. I don't see that. Maybe I'm wrong.
What, trading or?
I don't see the trade part of the equation.
See, I don't see him opting out of $51 million. This is one of the cheapest players in the league.
No, I get that part of it too. I just don't. I think the trade thing. I just don't envision it for him. Like I don't
Yeah.
see that as something he would do. I think if he opts in, he's staying. I think if he opts out, then everything is up for grabs.
The Lakers, I think, could go a long way here in convincing him to stay if they somehow pull off this DeJounte Murray trade, right? If they essentially, like, they meet him halfway here and they find a way to bring in another clutch client, somebody, a point guard who I think would be a little bit more dependable than D'Angelo Russell would be. I like what D'Angelo Russell has done this season. It's been a fun story and all of those things. Still don't trust him in the postseason, though.
There we go. That's it right there.
And by the way, LeBron just watched in last postseason. Not only did D'Angelo Russell get benched in that 4-game sweep to the Denver Nuggets, he was called out before it and specifically targeted and taken out of the series by the opposing head coach. And LeBron, I'm sure, saw that. It was like, I don't know if you could fix this. And I don't blame him for saying, like, I think I would like to bring in somebody who that isn't as much of a risk with.
And the precursor to that, before he was even benched, don't forget, Dave McMenamin had a report that said they were worried about benching him at that series or early in that series because they thought they'd lose him. Okay. And look,
Yeah.
if I had to guess, D'Angelo's probably tired of all this too. If I had to guess, and this is just a reckless speculation.
You don't have to. He said it. He said, I don't care anymore, which normally when people publicly say, I don't care, it means they care.
Right. But I think he wants, if I had to guess, he probably is okay with just being out, at this point. But to your point, and I know people will push back and say, well, DeJounte Murray's on the 27th ranked defense this year. Look at the team around him, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nobody on that team that's necessarily a good defender. Maybe Capella, but he's not even healthy anymore. And so DeJounte Murray, if they could get the San Antonio version of that, sure, no problem. You got a point of attack defender that can at least make Jamal Murray's life a little more difficult if you face them in a playoff series. But here's the thing. I said this yesterday on my radio show, and people can listen to the podcast to get the full extent of it, is there are two paths here, right, for the Lakers right now. And I don't know if appeasing LeBron is the right path necessarily, unless you truly feel that DeJounte Murray is part of your future moving forward, because his contract is worth it. I mean, it only tops out at about $30 million at the end, basically. So, and he's under contract for several more years. And he's still young, 27 years old. So, and he's shooting a career high from 3. So things are trending upward for him offensively in a way that you hadn't seen previously. And I know his previous 3-point percentage numbers were not great, but let's not forget, and I'm not trying to say that this is who he is, but Jason Kidd at around this age learned to shoot 3-pointers. He was terrible and then became one of the better 3-point shooters in the sport at this particular juncture of his career. So, The path is you go with DeJounte, right? And you trade D'Angelo and whatever assets you need to trade to get DeJounte, which, by the way, we don't know if they have enough assets to even get him. But I think you do, even without trading Austin potentially. Maybe I'm just optimistic. But there's one path. The other path is, hey, if you just stand pat, you may lose D'Angelo as an asset because he's got a player option. And maybe you lose LeBron because he has a player option. But you can at least convince LeBron and say, hey, we're going to have 3 picks, not 1 pick, 3 picks to go get you that third player that could fit well with you and AD, or a multitude of players that could potentially fit with you and AD. In other words, we can remake the roster in a bunch of different ways in the offseason when we have 3 first-rounders to give up as opposed to just 1 at this trade deadline. So if you can convince him of that, which isn't easy, I think that, in essence, is probably the better path long-term for this team, because you have to start to think at least a little bit beyond LeBron, which is tough because when you have LeBron, the understanding is you have to push the chips to the center of the table every chance you get.
Yeah. So way before, this was weeks ago, I recorded a show in which I said that was a plan that I think eventually would be pretty popular with the Lakers, is the idea that they could hold on to this 29 pick this season And then on draft night specifically, they would be able to move upwards of 3 picks. And um, it was funny because I was recording with Aaron, who appears on the show every week, and he kind of like caught himself like, whole, and when I said that, to go with that response from him, I started digging a little bit. And as it turns out, over the course of this deadline, that has become a more and more popular approach here to this deadline here with the Lakers, especially because, like, look, I like Murray. I think he's like right on the border of players I'd be willing to give up a first rounder for.
He's an occasional all-star caliber player, but with 3
Yeah.
picks, you can get a bona fide all-star,
Star.
perhaps ascending star to superstar type player.
Yeah, and Dorian Finney-Smith, somebody who I think would really help. I wouldn't give up a first rounder for him.
No.
The Detroit Pistons like to tell anybody and their mom about how they turned down 2 first rounders for Bojan Bogdanovic last year. It's like I wouldn't announce that I did something dumb to the world personally, but you know what? Do you?
Right, because now he's not worth that. Right.
Yeah, and so, like, and so on and so forth there. The market just doesn't have very many guys that I would like go out of my way to trade a first rounder for. And the guys that you would, I'm not even positive are necessarily on the market, right? Guys like Kyle Kuzma, the Washington Wizards are keep on talking about him, or that his name keeps on coming up. But every time I hear about him, it's like, is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 2 first rounders and a good young player? Is it 2 first rounders and a legitimate role player now? Alex Caruso, like, coming into the deadline, the price was so high on him that teams around the league were like,
right, which is also hard because Alex Caruso only makes $10 million. You know what I mean? So it's not, I don't even know, like, I get that they want a lot for him, but I don't know if you can get that much for him just because financially, I don't know if you could get that much for him.
Yeah, and so on and so forth, and that's why when this came up earlier, like literally minutes before you and I went live, Bill Ryder of CBS Sports tweeted, "Sources tell CBS Sports that a complicating factor on whether or not the Lakers acquire an impact player in the next 24 hours is the belief within the organization they could have a chance to acquire Donovan Mitchell this summer. Knicks could also be in play, or also could be in play." I've been like, the story on Mitchell essentially is that he has wanted to go to New York basically since he's been a Cleveland Cavalier
or Miami.
and
He's wanted to go to Miami too.
Also
Because
Miami.
remember, Dwayne Wade is the guy.
Mhm.
And I will tell you this, and this is something I mentioned on my radio show 2 off seasons ago. When the Heat, not this past year when they went to the finals, the previous year they beat Philly in the second round of the playoffs. You know who was hanging out outside the Heat locker room the entire time in Philly?
Yeah,
Donovan Mitchell. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is they will be in play too, for sure. I mean, as they tried for Dame unsuccessfully this offseason, they're going to have multiple picks to be able to give up too. So I think the Knicks is an obvious one because he's from Connecticut. He grew up a Knicks fan. His dad worked. I think he may still work, but definitely worked for the Mets. So he's a New York kid in a lot of ways, or the tri-state area. But Miami's going to be in play. And I think the Lakers should take a swing at him if he's available. And Cleveland has to deal him this offseason. This is going to be their time to maximize a Donovan Mitchell trade. So yes, I do think that those 3 teams and probably a few more will be in that mix.
Yeah, and I think for the Lakers, one theory that this is just a theory, this is just speculation on my part, but one theory that I've had bouncing around in my head here is that I don't think the Lakers want to use any post LeBron draft capital on anybody other than the star who will play with LeBron and then play with the Lakers after LeBron.
Correct.
And so when Bill, tweets it that way and phrases it that way, that was essentially like a version of the theory that I've had bouncing around in my head, is that, like, yeah, it kind of makes sense that I think the Lakers would happily give up whatever second round draft capital that they have to upgrade from, like, Gabe Vincent. You can actually swap Gabe Vincent's contract out with Dorian Finney-Smith, and you could attach however many second rounders to Gabe Vincent to get that done as you need to. I think that's something that the Lakers would happily do because they don't know that they're going to get anything from Gabe Vincent this year. if you wanted to go from D'Angelo Russell to DeJounte Murray, fine. But if it was something closer to Tyus Jones or something like that, again with second rounders or that would cost less to go out and get that, I think that is a path that
Yeah,
the Lakers
things
would
around
prefer
the
to do.
margins would make more sense because it would allow them to preserve the capital that they have, and will open up for this offseason to go get themselves that transitional player you're talking about.
Here's my only concern, though, and it tracks right back to LeBron, is that he has been told this a few times over by this front office. Just wait till this summer. Just you wait, right? When they traded for Russell Westbrook and it was a disaster right from the get-go. They didn't trade Russell Westbrook at that first deadline, and they're like, just you wait during the summer. We promise we're gonna move him. And they didn't wind up moving him that summer, right? They brought him back for the second season, and then in that second season traded him at the deadline. And then wouldn't you know it, the Lakers took off immediately. They've done this thing with LeBron where it was like, yeah, superstar X, wouldn't you like to play with this player? And I think this approach works with Pelinka, with Jeannie Buss, right? Where he's like, well, technically this player could be available in the summer. And Jeannie's like, oh yeah, that sounds nice. And and I think he gets the go ahead from ownership. But I kind of think at this point, LeBron, as much sense as Mitchell would make next to him and Anthony Davis, I wouldn't blame LeBron for like, all right, good
Not
luck.
a sure thing that you're going to get him, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like you have like the Knicks have more ammunition than you. You know what I'm saying? So there's that part of the equation.
Yeah.
From a draft,
You would almost need Mitchell to force his way to the Lakers, which is not something that anybody in the league thinks is going to happen.
No, he's not going to force his way anywhere. He's just going to, I mean, listen, if he wanted to force his way, he would not have gone to Cleveland. He wanted to go to the Heat at that time, or the Knicks. Those were the two teams that he was most linked to back then. So he's not that guy. He's not gonna upset the apple cart or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not what he does. So
Cavs are also good. They're the 2 seed.
Right. They also are
so
good. I don't think they're championship good. I think they're regular season good, but we'll see how that works itself out. So I do think that they know they need to maximize what they need to get for him, and this is the offseason to do it. But yeah, look, I will say this, and I'll leave you with this, okay? Because I got to go here in a couple minutes, unfortunately. But and thank you for having me as always. But LeBron, and I've repeated this on the radio show, and people can find it, on the podcast throughout the last several weeks that I've been talking about this. LeBron has given the Lakers so much more leeway than he ever gave the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah,
the runway he has given the Lakers, I mean, it's incredible. And Laker fans have no idea that that's been the case. Like they are not. I don't think they care. Because they feel like they're entitled to it because they're the Lakers. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
LeBron used to weaponize his contract all the time with the Cavs. And every opportunity he's had the chance to try to do that with the Lakers, he's chosen to bypass that particular option. So while you're right that, that they continually do this to him, he continually is okay with it, even though he may seem disgruntled about it. Ultimately, he doesn't take the nuclear option with them that he at least threatened to take with Cleveland in his second tenure there, and putting their feet to the fire constantly as he did there.
He did it with Miami.
Well, he did it at the end with Miami.
Remember, he was pissed at that they didn't bring back
Mike Miller was
Mike Miller,
was amnestied, right? Yes,
yeah, and by the way, again, that's what stars should do. They're the ones who were like, whose legacies are on the line with this stuff, like at the end of the day, LeBron is chasing Michael Jordan's numbers, and he's chasing legacy status that in stature that like we can only kind of barely fathom. I totally understand why he would apply pressure, but as you said, George, you do have to get going. Thank you very much. I'm going to stick around here. I'll answer some questions here from the comment section from this live audience. So get those questions in, and I'll answer them as best as I can. But thank you very much, George. Again, you can check out his show with Scott Kaplan, Sedano and Cap, 4 to 7 live on ESPN Radio, as well as via podcasts. Everywhere that you find your podcasts, you can check him out on the sidelines for ESPN games. You can check him out on Around the Horn, all over the place, man. Thank you very much for carving out a little bit of time here for for us on this tiny little show that you keep on helping us out with.
No, it's a great show. You know, I love you, kid, and you do a great job. And I know Laker fans don't love the Clippers, but you'll see me tonight on Clippers Pelicans, and next week Warriors Clippers. No Lakers games on the schedule until after the All-Star break, but nonetheless, that's where you'll see me. Thanks for having me again, bud. Take care.
Have a good one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take some questions here from the questions or from the comments in here, and I'll start here. So yeah, all right, they got Westbrook, and obviously it didn't work out very well, and that goes, on the docket of things that the Lakers had previously done for and with LeBron. I think we also need to hit this home though. They did it for and with LeBron, where Rob Pelinka was very much happy about bringing in Russell Westbrook, somebody who Kobe, the whole reason Rob Pelinka has this job is because of his relationship with Kobe Bryant. And Kobe would talk about Russell Westbrook as kind of the heir apparent to that whole like mama mentality thing. And so the idea that like Rob Pelinka would have to be forced, arm tied behind his back to make this call, it's just not true. And I don't think LeBron particularly appreciated in the years after that, the idea that Rob Pelinka was like perfectly okay, making it seem as if it was just LeBron who pulled the trigger on that deal. So that's that's something to take into account, even when you talk about somebody who LeBron wanted to get once upon a time, and the Lakers did go out and get on his behalf, but also on their own behalf too. They were happy to have Russell Westbrook. It was just a miscalculation as far as what his fit would be with LeBron James and how the organization would be able to operate with Russ's $47 million contract on their books. All right, I'm going to answer a question here from Matthew. Anthony, don't you think it's better to get Murray now? They can pair him with 2 firsts this off seasons rather than 3 firsts for a superstar. You know what? This is, had I had more time there with Sedano, I would have mentioned this too, that I actually like the idea of bridging that gap and operating in the middle there, where you use the 29 pick that you have at your disposal this year, and then you use both of the picks that you have at your disposal in this upcoming offseason to further add to the roster. The problem is, and this kind of goes back to what I talked about last night, and this kind of goes back to the way that Rob Pelinka just operates. Rob Pelinka is always going to prioritize superstars, period. That's how he operated as an agent. That is what he has done so far with the Lakers. That's just how this goes here with how he does his business and how he sees the game. And I really think that, and to the report that Bill Ryder threw out there, it makes a whole bunch of sense to me, in part because it was something that I was already thinking about anyway, but it makes a whole bunch of sense to me that Rob Pelinka would not want to trade the 29 pick because of the potential opportunity cost in this upcoming summer. And also, this is where LeBron's contractual status here matters as well, where the Lakers are probably not comfortable moving, post LeBron draft capital without knowing for a fact that LeBron would be here at least after this upcoming summer. And I think that is something that the Lakers are always going to weigh. So, here we go. So we finally get another trade. Adrian Wojnarowski is tweeting out that the Memphis Grizzlies are trading Xavier Tillman to the Boston Celtics for 2 second-round picks. All right. Obviously, doesn't really affect the Lakers all that much. Although I do like Xavier Tillman. I think he will help the Boston Celtics. I was really impressed with Tillman in the series against the Lakers when Memphis was really shorthanded. But here's where I'll say that this is noteworthy, in that we've seen two legitimate role players, like seventh or eighth guys in a good team's rotation, go for second round draft capital. And the more that we see these types of players move for second round draft capital, now Dorian Finney-Smith would be a starter. Alex Caruso clearly would be a starter. DeJounte Murray would be a starter. So maybe the going rate on starters is first round draft capital. But if the Lakers do want to do something, um, on the peripheries of their rotation, right? On the peripheries of their roster, then maybe, just maybe, you can add to the roster, turn Gabe Vincent into a player that you are more confident is going to help you this year with second round draft capital. And you do keep open that possibility of using all three picks here this summer. Or, like, by the way, I wrote this at the time for Silver Screen and Roll. I'd have to find the article again, and maybe I'll find it and write a different version of it for my own Substack. But the Lakers, in their own kind of way, have very, very quietly or loudly, if you've been paying attention, they've maintained this stance that they aren't positive what LeBron and AD are capable of doing for them in regards to championships, right? Every year, like Harrison and I have talked about this now for years, where it's like, uh, we feel like those guys continue to have to like prove to Rob Pelinka, hey, no, we're worth investing in. We promise we will, elevate the organization to higher highs if you just give us a decent roster. And it's always Rob Pelinka who's just like, well, we'll see, and that's why it's so frustrating that the two opportunities that LeBron and AD have had with even decent rosters, sensible rosters, you have a title to show for it and a trip to the Western Conference Finals to show for it. And if I'm those guys, I'm sitting here saying as well, look at what we've done when you've given us decent tools to work with. When when we've had like decent ingredients, we've actually made some really nice meals for you. And the fact that, like, I do sense that is going on in a way here again, where it's once again it's Rob Pelinka like having to weigh the idea of trading a 29 first or holding on to that first rounder. It does make me wonder if, like, even if that star does become available this summer, like, what would be that definition of a star? Would the Lakers maintain that it's a very narrow perception of that? And would they just ride out these LeBron years? Like, that's been, I know that this is a very kind of dark image that I'm painting for everybody here, but it is something that it's on my mind, and their actions kind of point towards it, where it's like, I kind of think that they have been surprised at how long LeBron has been this good for. And they are concerned that the second that they expend more draft capital to help LeBron, that he would start to break down in one way or the other. Last year's playoffs, he wasn't healthy, and your chances at getting hurt only increase as you get older. So the Lakers might be sitting there thinking like, let's hold on, let's keep as much of our powder dry as we possibly can, and maybe prepare for the post LeBron years, because there's no telling at this stage of his career when that might be. Every science and father time to this point has pretty like linearly uh you know showed diminishing returns on superstars here. And LeBron is very much the exception. And I do kind of wonder if the Lakers are kind of looking at that and saying like, well, until when? Because at some point, Father Time is going to win, right? Whether it's LeBron goes out on top and Father Time, takes his W alongside him, right? Whether it's a more active way where LeBron starts to look a little bit slower or whatever, or what have you. Eventually, Father Time is going to collect the payment that is due, and I don't think that the Lakers are very comfortable, expending a whole bunch of draft capital when that is hanging over your season. The one thing I would say, though, is that, like, you still have Anthony Davis, so you're kind of implicitly saying that you don't necessarily trust him either. So, um, yeah, and look, like, Devontae is makes a good point here, right? If you're operating like that, then you don't need to be a GM, especially a GM on a LeBron team. If that's how you see it, if you're just gonna ride this out with LeBron and you're just waiting for Father Time to do his thing, then, like, trade him and let Father Time do his thing to LeBron on a different team. The Lakers are never going to trade him, but that to me, like, more so than, oh, LeBron's making drama again, trade him for that. No, like, when I come to the realization every so often of, like, I think the Lakers maybe should trade LeBron, it has a lot more to do with the fact that I just don't think that the Lakers really honestly trust LeBron to stay healthy and to be able to win a championship. And if that's how you feel about him, then and maybe he is comfortable writing this out too, and that'll just be how his career ends. But yeah, with like, it feels like every year here for the last few deadlines, we have had some excuse made for why the Lakers don't want to expend the like most amount of draft capital that they can. And every year it's some new version of, well, we could maybe do something next year. And well, if we keep our draft capital, if we keep our draft stats last year, for example, when they did use some draft capital to move Russell Westbrook, um, the Lakers could have gotten more in that trade had they moved 2 first rounders along with Russell Westbrook. They could have gotten, I believe, a little bit more stuff. They could have made that trade earlier in the offseason and brought in Mike Conley, right? And I think that would have at that time cost multiple first rounders to do that. And at every turn, it was like, well, we want to hold on to some of our draft capital because on draft night we'd be able to move 2 first rounders, and just think what we'd be able to do to the roster with 2 first rounders at our disposal in this upcoming season. And then they don't, right? Like, this year, no trade was made over the summer using that draft capital. Instead, they used that extra pick that they held onto in that Russell Westbrook trade to draft Jalen Hood-Schifino, who's done just about as much as I have for the Lakers so far this season. So yeah, I all of this is to say, in a very kind of long and roundabout way, that if you pay close enough attention, the Lakers are sending a much clearer message to us than I think we would like to admit, right? That I don't know how confident they are in LeBron and AD in this current league. And yeah, I flatly disagree. If like their actions are pointing in that direction, and I flatly disagree with the direction that those actions are pointing in. Matthew writes, I don't think there's any way LeBron passes on that player option. He's a businessman and he's notoriously cheap, but that doesn't mean he couldn't pick up that option and ask to be traded. I don't like, there's this weird kind of sentiment around LeBron that he does not ever want to be like officially traded. Technically, when he went from Miami to Cleveland, it was a sign and trade. And I, nobody ever thinks about it that way because, it's a little different or whatever. But I don't get the sense that LeBron really wants to be traded. And also, the Lakers notoriously do not trade stars. Did not trade Kobe. Did not trade Magic. Did not trade Kareem. Did not trade Pau even, right? They tried, and technically, I guess they kind of did, right? In the no, yeah, no, yeah. I'd have to find. But the Lakers just do not like trading stars, and unless LeBron goes to them specifically and says, "Hey, we've had our fun. Let me go and pursue my 6th ring here." And look, like, yeah, they traded Shaq. That's a good point. But you know what it took to trade Shaq? It took years of fighting with Kobe, of showing up overweight, of demanding, giant contracts as he showed up overweight. He had the whole, he was a headache, man. Like, we always forget this. We always think it was like, oh, Kobe forced him out. And I think there's some of that to it. Like, I do think Kobe probably went to them and said, like, hey, it's either him or me. And I think the Lakers kind of made their decision, but like Shaq made it easy for them to make that decision. I do believe they traded Powell for CP3. But then after that, they kind of said, well, screw it. We're going to bring in Dwight and we're going to make it work. And they never wound up trading Powell. He signed elsewhere via free agency. And I, frankly think the Lakers missed an opportunity there. Like LeBron, I think would like to go and get his, fifth and sixth ring, ideally somewhere that does believe in him. And how that comes to pass is certainly fascinating to watch. Here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to call it on this episode here. Throw the conversation that I just had with George right onto the podcast feed. And then depending on how the news trickles out or doesn't, because this is the day usually where like things are really supposed to ramp up. And, I'll go live here in the lounge later tonight around the same time that I did last night to discuss what did or did not happen. And as is always the promise, if the Lakers, exactly, the Lakers never traded Alex Caruso, point made. But the Lakers, again, as I'm told, still very quiet there in terms of what they've actually been able to accomplish. I'm told that Rob Pelinka is still trying really, really hard to get something done. If that changes and if we get any breaking news, I will jump right back in here to break that down. So that's the promise as it stands right now. And then, if nothing else, and I'll go later tonight, I'll go live to discuss what didn't happen if we don't get a deal, and then preview, tomorrow, which I do think, like, if today continues to be quiet, I do think tomorrow will be a lot louder. I've heard that there are some deals kind of already have their framework worked out, and that those would be executed probably tomorrow. But yeah, until then, though, and until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm Anthony Irwin saying have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I'll talk to you. Shoot, it could be a matter of minutes, could be a matter of hours, could be a matter of whenever. Please do subscribe. Please do hit that like button. Please continue helping this thing grow, and I'll talk to you guys when I do.